What is up, everyone? Welcome to HiFi Turtle, where we talk about everything audiophile. Today I am talking about a loudspeaker. This is the YG Acoustics Talus. The Talus is part of the YG Acoustics Peaks series, which differentiates itself from the reference line being a cost, no object line. The Peaks series represents not a really affordable line, to be honest, but a cost is considered line. And the Talus fits right there as the entry-level floor standard in the series at $14,200. YG Acoustics sent me this speaker for this review, and it's the one that I actually asked YG for. What piqued my interest in the Talus is that it is unique in the lineup and unique in my experience with loudspeakers in my room, and that is that the Talus is a two-way floor standing speaker. Before we continue, make sure you hit that thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps the channel grow so we can do awesome reviews like this with more and more companies. Also consider becoming a Patreon of the channel. You'll unlock exclusive videos and hopefully you can help make the channel better. I hope that the channel has gotten better since the early days as far as production quality and all that. You can leave a comment below and tell me what you think, but consider becoming a Patreon and you'll help contribute to the future quality of this channel. I think over the years we've seen a few high-end manufacturers start to offer these two-way floor standing speakers. YG themselves have offered the Caramel for years, and that is also a two-way floor stander. But we see the likes of the Sonus Faber Maxima, the Magico S1, and others bringing that two-way floor stander to the world of high-end audio. So like I said earlier, the Peak series represents the entry point into the YG Acoustics family, but again, while it is the entry point, it doesn't mean that it is not a premium loudspeaker. There's a lot of technology in the Talus that distills from the much more expensive reference line from YG. If you are familiar with YG, you'll know that they're masters of CNCing and using aluminum for the build of their loudspeakers, not only the cabinet, but the drivers as well. On the Peak series, while it is not an entirely aluminum body, you do get the front thick baffle made from aluminum, and then the rest of the cabinet is not MDF or HDF. This actually really surprised me because when I first saw the Peaks when it debuted a few years ago, I was thinking, oh, that's cool. They put aluminum on the front and then it's MDF on the side, and you know, it's just cheaper that way. But this is the part where I believe why this speaker in particular, or this line in particular, it's made in the USA of global parts, because the other panels that you see on the speaker, I almost just touched the tweeter, that would have been really bad, are a resin that is made in Europe, and this is an inch thick on every wall. And it's a resin, which is really surprising to see in a loudspeaker of this cost, because when we think of resin-built loudspeakers like those from Wilson Audio, well, there's no floor standard from Wilson Audio that's anywhere near this price. And while unlike the reference models where you can choose between silver and black, the Peak series only lets you have the black aluminum finish on the front. The sides are choosable in a variety of wood veneers. In this case, I have the flamed rosewood, which I think looks absolutely stunning, but there are some lighter and other color options as well. Building on the foundation of expertise with milling and CNCing aluminum, you do get the footer with the Talus, and this footer is made of aluminum, of course, and is really thick, really non-resonant, and just feels really premium, and I'm just impressed with the quality of this footer. It's super sharp, could be used as a weapon, honestly. Then you come to the billet core driver that is made in-house by YG. This is a 7¼ inch driver, and it is an aluminum cone. What makes it very special, and this is true for all YG drivers, is instead of being stamped or pressed, it is CNC'd from a solid block of aluminum into the driver itself. Now, YG says that when you stamp or press aluminum, it forms micro cracks, hairline changes in the properties to the aluminum, and CNCing and milling it is a much more timely and expensive process, but a much better process for the reproduction of sound. Tweeter is a soft dome that YG calls Forge Core. It doesn't have the inner aluminum backing like the reference models do, but this is a soft dome tweeter with a really deep waveguide. It almost kind of gives a horn loading effect to the tweeter, but the tweeter itself is super thin. Like looking from it from the front, it's almost see-through. Like you can see the behind the portion of the motor structure behind the tweeter when looking directly at it. The overall build quality is excellent. You see the cabinet is tapered in a way to defeat internal standing waves. It's not just angled on the sides, there's angles and then there's a taper to the back. So that is formed in a shape that will defeat those standing waves even better internally. The binding posts are a high quality pair of WBTs. The wood veneer is stunning and gorgeous, and the subtle detailing up into the logo on the front I think is excellent. It has a nice little shimmer to it against the black color finish of the other aluminum, and it just stands out and kind of screams like this is a premium product. This speaker is 89 dB efficient, 7 ohms nominal, and YG specs it down to 32 hertz in room response. That's not -3 or -6 dB, that is in room. I don't have the measurement equipment to tell you what the -3 or -6 would be, but I have to imagine that it's probably in the lower to mid 40 hertz from what I did here in room. For electronics pairings, I feel like the Talus had one of the best chances to be paired up with a variety of electronics of any loudspeaker that has ever been in my room. Not only did I get to test it on the Sim Audio North 761 and 791 system, but my mainstay, Electro Compagnie, Benchmark LA4, Hagel H20, and also the SPL 800, the SPL M1000, and on the DAC section, the Benchmark DAC 3. One of the things I talked to with Duncan from YG Acoustics in getting these here is that I had the Sim Audio North collection coming, and I thought that it'd be more apropos to have something from the reference line from YG. And while he was totally gung-ho about that, there wasn't anything available for me to review, so I ended up with the Talus. Now, it may seem strange to pair up a $14,200 loudspeaker with a combined value $30,000 front end, but I have to say the Talus scaled incredibly well with those electronics and was definitely my favorite presentation of the Talus, and I didn't feel like that the electronics were too good for the Talus. But as far as pairings go for the Talus, I feel like that the speaker itself is a brighter and more forward loudspeaker, very similar in voicing and character to Bowers & Wilkins or Rockport speakers. So if pairing it with warmer combinations of electronics like the Electro Compagnie ECM1 and the Hagel H20, as well as those electronics from Sim Audio, those were really a well-paired match. Now, throwing in the Benchmark DAC 3 with the LA4, that can be a little bright at times and maybe a little over analytical. But if we had something like the Descent subwoofer added in, then maybe it kind of balances out that brightness. But the more analytical the electronics, the brighter these are going to appear. I would have loved to try the Talus with a tube amplifier, but I just don't have one at the moment. And I feel like if it was a tube amplifier, it would have had to been one that had a lot of power behind it, because these things seem to really like power. Powering it with the H20 or the 761 is no problem, but throwing in the S800, which still has a lot of watts, a 135 into 8 ohms, you can tell that you're not getting the most out of the Talus from that particular amplifier. I've already told you the voicing for the Talus is analytical, it's forward, it's a little bit brighter. What about the other characteristics of the sound? Is the bass sufficient in a two-way floor standing speaker? A two-way sealed floor standing speaker, if I didn't mention that at the beginning. So with the Talus, I would definitely recommend adding a subwoofer, but it's going to depend on how much bass you really want and what kind of music you listen to. If you're listening to a lot of classic rock and country music, I would say that the Talus is a wonderful speaker with a beautiful mid-range, and the spatialness and 3D image that comes from these is unbelievable. The two-way design definitely helps with that. Two-ways are typically better at imaging and sound staging, but it really is something to behold. There's a 3D-ness to the overall presentation of the music that is really wonderful and brings these long gone and old time tunes to a new life. I particularly really enjoyed listening to some really old honky-tonk country like Buck Owens, Act Naturally, and Johnny Paycheck, Georgia in a Jug. That was probably one of my absolute favorites on the Talus, and From the presentation that I heard at Expona, there was a song about a dog that died, and I know that's kind of morbid. I'll put that song below in the description as well. It's actually a song I've heard somewhere else, but another kind of, not old honky-tonk tune, but definitely kind of a more old country style song. Listening to something more contemporary like Lightning by Charlie XCX, there is still a lot to enjoy in that song, even though it may be considered a more electronic kind of song, maybe a little bit more on the bass head side. And I will say that songs that were built to have a lot of bass, such as EDM, dubstep, things of that nature, those really were nice on the Talus, because since there is so much bass, it came out feeling like you weren't missing anything when listening to those tracks. But definitely the mixing on Lightning, the vocals from Charlie, the interlacing of electronic sounds with analog sounds is really nice, in that just 3D sound staging as the panning of Charlie's voice and the panning of the strings in that song come out. It's just kind of mind-blowing to listen to and be like, whoa, look at that. Everything's kind of swirling around you and like pointing out where everything is. The instrument separation is great. And that's coming from a contemporary pop recording that, when you think of instrument separation, it's probably not Lightning by Charlie XCX. Now, listening to my more mainstay, death metal, heavy metal music, I will say that at times, depending on the track and the song and the artist, that could really trip up the Talus. It sometimes would get overly bright just because that's just the way that it was produced. But some more old school recordings like those from Rage Against the Machine, Testament, and Metallica were definitely very enjoyable on the Talus. Being that brighter and more analytical feel, the treble really is great. It's fully detailed. There is a very tactile feel to the treble region, and that's interesting to come from a soft dome tweeter. This kind of style of sound I typically associate with the more hard dome tweeters, the metal dome tweeters, that I've heard, or even ribbon tweeters. The mid-range has a great lifeness to it. It feels realistic. It doesn't feel artificial. Again, that depth and the 3D-ness of the soundstage really gives a awesome lifelike presentation to the overall tones, and the decay of the mid-range is actually quite enticing as well. But again, I think the biggest wow factor from the Talus is certainly the overall sound staging and imaging, the 3D-ness, the depth of that sound stage. Even though it is a more forward speaker and you feel like the music is kind of right in front of you, that doesn't prevent it from having a deep and detailed 3D soundstage. That's going to do it for me. I really enjoyed my time with the YG Talus. Ever since I heard my first YG speaker, I've been a huge fan of the company. So to work with them, have them send me something like this, and hopefully in the future have something from the reference line is amazing. If you like this video, make sure you hit that thumbs up, subscribe. It helps the channel grow. And make sure you check out the links below in the description for other ways to help support the channel. And I'll see you in the next one.